Here we go. What's going on, everybody? This is Don, Third Creative, thirdcreative.com, and welcome to the tutorial walkthrough video for the newest template to hit thirdcreative.com. It is Rough Riders baseball and softball. Had a lot of fun with this one, and today we're going to go over all the options. Of course, as always, there's tons of options, tons of layers. I'm going to show you all the different things you can do with this thing and just really how to get the most out of it. So hopefully you're going to check this video out so that you can get in there and use all the features and create something really cool. Let's go ahead and get started. I am at thirdcreative.com. Currently, Rough Riders on sale. So hopefully, if you're watching this, it's while that sale is running. Let's take a look at this thing. We're going to have all the same files: 2 verticals, 2 horizontals, and a pano. You got your 4:5 ratio, your 2:3 ratios, and the pano is a 1:3 ratio. Should cover all your bases. It's got a nice warm feel to it on the out of the box files, but you got a lot of color options, color grading built in. So let's just keep going right down. We'll look at these images real quick. When I first put out the base image that I created for a young man, Lance Martin, I shared it with some people, and I can't remember the name, but somebody said, hey, what about some pine trees for us people up here in the Northwest? And made sense. And yesterday somebody also asked, hey, what about a Canadian flag? That also made sense. I can't put every flag in there, but I at least have the Canadian flag and the American flag covered. So if that doesn't fit what you're looking for, luckily you can just turn that flagpole off completely. We also have the pine tree line, and as you can see on this lower image here, we've got a palm tree option, and then we also have a third, and I'm sure there's a proper name for it, but I just call it a traditional tree line. But as you can see here, you know, I've got a multicolor background. I've got a bluish tone with a nice warm haze that's coming in from the left, kind of representing kind of a sunset. I've got the same thing going on here. It's just that the orange background and the yellowish haze are kind of close to each other, so they create kind of a gradual fade into that orangish color. And then if you look down here, I went with a solid color, purplish blue. You can even go grayscale black and white. Got a few more sample images here. You can go, you know, with a subtle solid color, or you can go with something really bold like this red one. And then I've got an example of a black and white down here. And just to finish it off, here's another good example. I've got a solid grayish blue color on the left. That's with this sunset color grading turned off, and if I turn it on and I make the grayish blue color a little more vibrant, a little more saturated, you get this look. But just a few clicks and you can kind of see the difference of some of the options you have. That's pretty much it for the sample images. Let's jump into this thing. There we go. All right, so we're going to work with the 2:3 ratio. This has the memory mate option turned on when you open it. You can easily turn it off, make it a single image, but the same thing applies to the 4:5 ratio, the 16:20. I believe it has the memory mate turned off, but you can turn it on, move things around just a little bit, and quickly you can get this memory mate look. Let's go ahead and start by turning off the top player, subject, and the team. And we'll just kind of look at this background. We'll come down here to this very bottom folder, background. We'll open it up. And we'll just kind of work our way through it so you know what's going on with all this stuff. So very bottom layer, if I turn it off, it only affects just the bottom portion of this. And you can go in and change the color. Right now it's almost solid black, not quite. You can adjust it depending on how light or dark you want it to be, or if you want it to be saturated. But there are some color grading layers above it that will affect its color if you just kind of leave it grayscale. Next we have this dirt texture at the bottom. So we can zoom in and you can kind of see what, well, a little touchy. You see what that looks like. Let's see. There you go. And it does have some options to play with the levels and the saturation, but really you can just leave that one alone. You can leave this sky alone unless you want to play with the levels to make it a little more bold or less bold. Now we have our tree option, so it's real simple. Traditional trees turned on, turn it off. You got no trees, you can select palm trees to turn it on, or the pine trees. Pretty self-explanatory. Inside there are subfolders, and if you open them up you can see the actual layers. So you can move them around, you can scale them, you can rearrange them if you care to. Let's see, we'll go back to traditional. Next we have our grandstand seats. So you see we turn that off, what you get. Now you can see that this color grading is masked out here, and if you ever make any rescales or repositions with this thing, you'll want to make sure that you select all the layers to keep that uniform. Next we've got an atmosphere or haze. So if you want things bolder, you can turn that off, but I think that creates a little depth, a little more realism. Now in here we have our flag options. So I've got it set up where you've got the pole by itself, and then you can turn on and off the flags that you want to use. Pretty easy. Let's see here. We've got our light poles. So you can turn them off and see that the lights on layers are separate. And I did that for a reason, because this next layer here, change background color. Looks like I misspelled background. I'm sure you guys can figure it out. I didn't want this background color layer affecting the actual illumination of the lights. So I did put lights on or off way up here, so you can see. You can turn them on, you can turn them off, but I wanted that to be a clean, pure light look, I guess. So you have your light poles separate from that. So if you move them around, you'll need to open them up and select their respective, so you got left, and then you can hold down the command button. Now you've got both of them selected. Now you can rescale or move them around or whatever you need to do. So that's how that's set up. What else we got? This one's an important one. We've got change background color. Let's just see what it looks like if I turn this off. Ooh, yeah, we want to keep that on. Very important. But it's cool because you can come in and basically this is just your general color that you want in the background. There's a few other options further up, layers that affect color, but this is really the first thing that you want to go to. And right now it's set to red and it's barely saturated. If I turn that saturation all the way down, you can see this is black and white, and it's only a separate color grading, like sunset layers, that's adding that yellowish color in there. But you can control how much color you want. So if you want something really bold, obviously you can control the saturation. You can also, I've got it set to red, you can play with the color. You can, I mean, some of this may not look super realistic or natural, but you get the idea. Cool is very realistic and natural. You can have a very cool evening with just a hint of sunlight coming in from the left there. In fact, some of my sample images, I went with this option here. But that's how you control the general color of the background. So let me back everything up. Let me make sure. Okay, yeah, that's good. All right, so that's your first go-to right there. Change background color. Here is the sunlight. I can't remember how I titled this, but it's basically the color grading effect to get the sunlight sunset effect. So you can see you can turn it off. It really kind of loses a lot of its drama, a lot of the effect. So that's up to you, but it's an option if you want to leave it off or on. Let's see. Let's turn it back on here. Now, there is a color overlay, so you can open this up and you can play with the look that you want. It is set to overlay, so it's not going to affect it super dramatically, but you can go through and change the color, the intensity. You can come down to dark, and you see it's very subtle, but we're going to cancel out of that. You can control that sunset color. Another option you have to control it, actually let's go back in there. You notice the opacity is set to 24. You can control the intensity here. We'll hit cancel. And or a combination of the opacity. It's set to 50%. If I boost that all the way up, you can see that's where you really start to see some dramatic difference. So we'll go back to how it was set originally. This next layer desaturates sunlight. So if you notice we turn this off, that's like desaturating it. It's actually getting rid of it, getting rid of the color. But if you want to keep that look, but keep it just black and white, you can do that. You can just turn on that desaturate. This is a desaturate entire background, so you can get true black and white. Remember, we have a reddish tint set up right down here. And then if you want to colorize the entire background, you can do that. Open this up, and this is where you can get a pretty bold look if you want. You may want something that dramatic, maybe not. I'll go ahead and turn that off. Let's see. That is pretty much it for setting up your background. I think we'll leave it like we had it there. So next we have player name, top. Pretty self-explanatory. I set up two different options depending. You may not want something that bold, so we've got this option you can use, and we have this option you can use. And really it's just the text layer effects. Obviously you can use any font that you want, so if neither of these two work for you, just plug in something that does. But for this this default text layer for the team or for the player name, I've got a stroke. So you can double click on stroke. It is a gradient, so it is a little darker at the bottom. We can actually zoom in a little bit to see a little better. All right. So if you're not familiar with gradients, hop on YouTube, check out a quick video, and you'll get caught up. I've got a bunch of gradient presets, but you can click here and you can select the lower darker color here and your lighter color here. Will fade to the top. We also have a gradient overlay. It's set to red. Same thing. So the inner color you can change. You can actually turn this off and go with solid color if you want to. Keep it simple if you don't want to mess with gradients. I like gradients. And then we've got a drop shadow that you can control the opacity, distance, size, etc. Pretty simple stuff. And with this other one, it's just a gradient overlay, no stroke, and a drop shadow. Let's see. Let's go ahead and turn on the top player subject. So this is pretty straightforward. We'll open this up. You drop your sample or your subject images in here. It does have a gradient mask already. So depending on how you set this thing up and arrange things, this gradient mask may or may not be set up, you know, the way that you needed it to. So if it's not, it's real simple. With that gradient mask selected, go to your gradient tool, make sure you're on black to white, hold down shift, and you can just play. That's the opposite. I seem to always do that. You'd think I'd learn, but you can make it wherever and however you want it. So really simple, easy to control. Above it, you'll see 3 clipped layers, and these layers are clipped to this folder for the top player subject. And above it, we have the memory mate folder where you put your team images, and it has the same ones. So I guess I could have put both of them in one folder and just clip these to that, but I didn't want to have a ton of subfolders, and there may be an instance where you want to have it a little different with your main subject than your team image. But the same rules apply to both. Player color grade. This is actually a hue/saturation adjustment layer, and what I did is I set it to colorize. So let's just experiment here. Let me back out just a second. Let's turn opacity all the way up. It's going to look bad. And so if I have colorize, if I turn it off, turn it on, it basically applies whatever color, saturation, lightness point that you have to the entire image. So I can. So by reducing this, you can control how much it affects your subject. Now this is just the eye test to me, but I wanted a warm color, a warm tone that matches the background, and this is where I fell or landed. You can control the saturation, which will make him a little more bold or less bold. You can control the lightness and the darkness, which you probably don't want to go too drastic in either direction. And you can obviously control the color. So if you have that spooky kind of eerie greenish background sunset, you can apply that to your liking. But it's a combination of all 3 sliders, and of course the opacity on how much you want it to affect your image. Same thing applies to the memory mate folder and the player color grade that's attached to it. So just play around with it. It's really, I know it takes a little bit of time, but to me it's really worth it because it makes things just look a little more realistic, and it just kind of ties everything together. You probably have seen some images where you've got a kind of a warm background and it's kind of dark and moody, and then you have a subject image that's just really bright, and you can play with white balance to help with that, but this is a nice extra step that helps. Now I have a saturation level just for the general saturation that I've added here, and with it turned, we're working down here. With it turned off, it does increase the saturation a little bit. The background's semi-desaturated. It's not super bold, so I felt like this was a little bit too bold. So you can leave that on, you can turn it off, or you can come in here and you can adjust it to your liking. Just another option. And then this, I have lower exposure fade. This is basically creating light fall off. So you can see I wanted the lower portion to be darker, and the same thing applies just like the layer mask. If you use your gradient tool, you can control, see I did it again, you can control how it effects to apply. You want something super gradual or something really quick and harsh. You're in control of that. And let's see if we can get back to where we were at. Maybe somewhere in there. Cool. So that's how that works. Again, same thing applies to Memory Mate. So if you turn this on, you can do all of those same things. You can control the light fall off, so you see how bright that is. If I turn that off, you can control the saturation, makes them a little bolder. You can control the color grade of the tone, same ways that I just showed you. You also have this mask here, so you can use your gradient tool and you can control, where the gradient mask starts and ends. It's all in your control. Last one is text and graphics. So we're moving right along. All right, let's just start. I guess we'll just start maybe at the top. So we've got these two flares, and it does say reposition, and they're very subtle, but this is something that I like to do, and it's actually not even really showing up a ton. If I switch it to normal, you can see where it's at. It's right there on the corners of these R's. So if you change this, you'll either want to turn these off or you'll want to position them. And I like to put them just in the upper left corners of some of the prominent letters, like I've done here. You can create more by duplicating them, but just be sure to either turn them off or put them where they belong when you customize your text. So next we have team name option 1, and that's this default font here, and obviously you can edit that. You can come in and change the stroke. It is also a gradient. You can change the stroke to a solid color if you'd like, or change it to a gradient that works for you. This is not true like grayscale. This has a little bit of warm tone into it, so you may want to just change it like very light gray to solid white or whatever works for you. There's also the inner gradient overlay, and there's also the drop shadow. It's very similar to what we went over with the upper player name text layer, but there is an alternate. We've got this team name. It's different font, different look. You can scale this. You can change the positioning or the space between the letters. You can make it bigger, smaller. Same things apply. You've got the stroke, the gradient, and the drop shadow. It's all customizable. So you're in control of that as well. Now we have a subtext option. So let's see what that is. That is this down here. And I just labeled it subtext because it can be so many different things. In the case of a competitive travel team, they're part of a club. So this is the 17 black team. You could have it say varsity. You could have it say the name of the school. You can say whatever you need it to say. And it's just a solid color, and it's controlled up here. Or if you double click here, you should get this box up here at the top, and you control it. And usually, to me, I don't like anything too bright. I like it to kind of be subtle. So that's why I kind of have it dark here. And just to demonstrate what I'm talking about, if I make this something super bright, that's just distracting to me. But that's just personal preference. You can select any color that works for what you're doing. Now we've got our year, and it's the same thing. Real simple. You got your stroke, which is a gradient, and you've got your gradient overlay, which you can control, and you've got your drop shadow, which you can control. Next, let's see here. So we've got baseball or softball option. So here you can see we have this streaking baseball. I've got it in this folder here. You can turn that off, and you can do the softball, and you can rescale and reposition if you want, but you pick which one depending on the team that you're working with. Now, it has this adjustment layer that's clipped to it. It says warm color temp of ball. So if you turn it off, it's going to give it a cooler temperature. So it works in that regard, but if you want to take it a step further, if you do a colorized background, let's say you're doing a softball team and they're purple, open this up, set to colorize, and you can just make it the color that you want. Again, you can control the saturation, you can control the lightness and darkness, but that's another way that you can use that. So we'll leave it on warm. Next we have flares on main text. And so these are all very subtle, but they're there. They're set to overlay. If you turn them off, if you look at the word baseball, if you turn them off, you see you just lose some highlights. And so if you leave this word as baseball, they'll just fall into place. If you change it to softball, probably barely even notice, but you can go in and reposition them however you want. These streaks are on the top half, so you can turn them off. You see the look that you get. You may not want the streaks. They're there, but that really doesn't look bad in my opinion. So you can reposition them, rearrange them. If you change the sport name to something else like softball, or if you rescale it, you can scale them all together, but you have that control if you want it. Of course, we have the sport text option, so this will be baseball or softball. Now, you may be one of those people that might take this graphic and you might throw it over onto another template, so it could be anything, theoretically it could be anything. So you can customize what it says, but to control how it looks, we've got a bevel and an emboss. Probably want to leave that alone unless you're really experienced and you do want a little different look. But you can see what it does if I turn it off. Kind of makes it a little less three-dimensional. We've got 2 strokes. So this first stroke is the innermost stroke. Currently, it's set to this creamish color white. So you can control not only the colors with this gradient, but you can control the size and you can control the positioning. Right now it's set to center. You can choose inside, outside. It's got a lot of options there. Now the second stroke is bigger, so it extends out beyond the first stroke, and that's where this color is. So you can control these colors of these strokes. And as you might have noticed in the sample images, there's all sorts of variations on what you can do. There's also an inner shadow, so you can look here where my cursor is and see how that looks. And then there's an outer glow, which is actually set to blue, but you can barely notice. You can turn that off, or you can change the color. Pretty big difference there. And then the last thing, if you want to turn it on, is a gradient overlay. So right now it's transparent because fill is down to 0. So I can bring it all the way up and it'll fill in with this default color that's up here. If you bring it all the way down to 0, that's where you can see through, and that's a cool look, but maybe you want it to be solid. So you can either turn the fill up and control the color there, or you can turn on this gradient overlay. And we've already talked about gradient overlays, but you can control the look that you want here. You can also turn the gradient overlay on and then control the opacity. So if you want a little bit of color but a little bit of transparency, that's a nice trick to have up your sleeve too. All right, let's get back. Yeah, somewhere in there. What else do we have? Okay, yeah, this little graphic here, it's just a text layer with slashes, and then I've got this mask to kind of have it fade out towards the edges, and so you just control it. You can double click and come up here, but what I suggest is to just highlight this and have your character panel and choose it here. Choose any color you want, but a little tip from me, and this is just my personal taste, I don't like anything too bright. So you can see you get a much different look. I like it to be subtle, kind of like this subtext. So I keep it down in this lower portion. That's just what I like. So we'll cancel out of that. And wow, that is everything. So I don't know, I just kind of flew through all of that, but I wanted to explain all the layers, how they work, and how you can get the most out of this. If you're in a rush, you know, you can just drop something in there and not change much. But if you really want to get the best look, use these color adjusting, color grading layers and features that are built in here. They really set everything off. I think that is it. So I hope I've answered any questions that might come up, but as always, if I haven't, or if you ever have any questions, shoot me an email, don@thirdcreative.com, or go to the website and choose the contact option. I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. And that's all I got for today. So as always, I want to thank all of you for your support. It's almost 2 years now. It's pretty crazy. But you help keep me going, and hopefully I'm helping you make all that cash. All right, that's it. Until next time, see ya.